The rain had started without warning, a sudden curtain of silver slicing through the dim light of the late afternoon. Nathaniel Collins tightened the scarf around his neck and hurried along the narrow cobblestone streets of Windermere, a small town that had never seemed particularly remarkable until today. Today, something had drawn him here, though he could not have said why. The letters he had received, and signed and typed on yellowed stationery, were filled with directions. Turn left at the old clock tower, cross the iron bridge, enter the alley that smelled of damp wood and old smoke. And at the end, a door. One door, with no markings, no handle, nothing to indicate it was anything more than an ordinary, weathered slab of oak. Yet it was different. He had passed it several times in his life, walking these streets, never noticing it. But now, standing before it, Nathaniel felt a pulse of something intangible in his chest, an urgent whisper of dread and fascination intertwined. The wood looked older than time should allow, blackened at the edges and streaked with a silver patina of rainwater. The air around it seemed heavier, thickening, pressing against him. A subtle vibration tickled the soles of his feet, almost imperceptible, like the faint heartbeat of the door itself. Nathaniel tried to rationalize it. Perhaps it was the storm. Perhaps it was the isolation, the way the alley had shrunk around him until he was swallowed in shadows. He touched the door. Cold. Not just cold, but impossibly, unreasonably so, as though it had drawn the temperature of the world out of itself. And then he heard it, or thought he did, a sound like breathing, soft, deliberate, coming from the other side. He stepped back, his pulse quickening. Nothing in his life had prepared him for moments like this, for a sensation that clung to his skin and filled his lungs with tight, anxious air. A rational person might have walked away, yet Nathaniel felt rooted, not by fear, but by something deeper, something almost alive that beckoned him forward. He pressed his hand against the door again, this time leaning closer. The breathing stopped. The silence that followed was thicker than the storm outside, more oppressive. Nathaniel frowned, then shook his head. He was imagining it. He had to be. Wind whistled through the alley, scattering scraps of wet newspaper across the stones. A page fluttered against his boots, and as he bent to pick it up, he noticed the writing. Not printed, but etched, scratched in careful loops and curves that seemed impossibly deliberate. To see what no one has seen, you must first step beyond yourself. The words were simple, yet they burrowed into his mind, lodging there like a splinter he could not remove. Nathaniel's rational mind recoiled, but curiosity, a deeper, more primal curiosity, drove him to the edge of reason. He glanced over his shoulder. The street behind him was deserted, save for the occasional shadow cast by the flickering street lamp. Even in the storm, he was alone, and yet he felt eyes on him. Not human eyes, not warm or watchful. Something cold, distant, and unblinking. Something waiting. The first step through the door was small, almost hesitant. He placed his fingers on the edge and pushed. The door opened easily, silently, revealing darkness deeper than any night he had ever known. Not the absence of light, but the absence of everything. The air was thick and dry, smelling faintly of metal and old paper, a scent that made the back of his throat tighten. Nathaniel stepped through, and the door closed behind him with a quiet click, like a heartbeat stopping. He found himself in a corridor, narrow, the walls impossibly smooth and pale, reflecting a dim, bluish glow from nowhere he could identify. The space seemed endless, stretching forward and upward without any hint of ceiling or floor. Each step he took echoed unnaturally, though there was no visible source for sound to bounce from. Nathaniel swallowed, his own voice catching in his throat as he whispered, "Hello." No answer came, only the corridor stretching on, shifting subtly as he moved, as if alive. Shadows danced in places where light shouldn't exist, and he thought he caught glimpses of figures just beyond his vision. Every time he turned, they disappeared. A sudden sense of vertigo washed over him. The walls were closer now, or perhaps he had slowed. Time felt different here, slower, thicker, heavy in the chest. Nathaniel tried to step back, to find the door he had come through, but the corridor seemed to fold upon itself. Every turn led to another identical stretch of pale, silent passage. He realized, with a pang of genuine fear, that he had no idea which way was back. And then came the whispers, soft at first, brushing the edges of his hearing like silk sliding over stone. Indistinct syllables, mutterings, unintelligible. Yet, somehow, they seemed familiar, personal. Nathaniel froze, every muscle tightening. The whispers grew, overlapping, echoing from all directions. Not words, exactly, but fragments of thought. "You shouldn't be here. They've been waiting. We see you," he ran. Not thinking, not analyzing, just running. His shoes slipped on the cold, unyielding floor. Every corner he turned revealed another corridor, another stretch of pale emptiness. The whispers chased him, growing louder, more insistent, but never forming full sentences, never allowing him understanding. Only fear. A shadow detached itself from a wall, a long, sinewy shape, just at the periphery of his vision. It moved against the geometry of the corridor, angles bending unnaturally, stretching impossibly high, then shrinking low to the ground. Nathaniel stumbled, nearly falling, but kept moving, his mind screaming for escape. And then he saw it. A door. Not like the one he had entered, but similar. Slightly ajar. A faint golden light spilling from its edges. Relief surged through him. Hope that he might finally find the way back. But as he approached, the light pulsed in rhythm with the whispers, and the air vibrated with a low, resonant hum that seemed to pierce the very marrow of his bones. Nathaniel hesitated. He could not stop himself, yet some part of him screamed to turn away, to run blindly back into the twisting corridors, away from this door that felt alive, sentient, and impossibly aware of him. His fingers brushed the handle. The whispers crescendoed into a wave of sound that was almost unbearable, like wind shrieking through a canyon, voices overlapping and overlapping until he could no longer distinguish his own thoughts. He inhaled a single, deliberate breath and pushed the door open. The room beyond was wrong. It was empty, yet full. The walls were covered in mirrors, reflecting his own terrified image 1,000 times, fracturing it into angles that made no sense. The floor rippled beneath his feet, not solid but liquid, glimmering with faint light. And in the center, a figure, or what he thought was a figure, stood waiting. Its form was indistinct, shifting, neither human nor anything else, but Nathaniel felt, instinctively, that it was aware of him, studying him, waiting. A voice, soft, almost gentle, echoed in his mind, bypassing his ears entirely. "You should not have come here. And yet, you are already inside." The door behind him had vanished. The corridor, the rain, the world outside, everything was gone. And Nathaniel understood, with a clarity that was terrifying, that he was not meant to leave. Not yet. Not ever, perhaps. He fell to his knees, the mirrors reflecting countless versions of himself, each one whispering his deepest fears. The figure advanced, slowly, deliberately, and the air grew thick, heavy with the sense that reality itself was bending, folding, and waiting to consume him. Nathaniel closed his eyes, willing himself awake. Nothing changed. The whispers grew louder, merging into a single, unbroken hum, vibrating through his very bones. And he realized that whatever this place was, it was alive. It had always existed, waiting behind doors that no one had seen for someone like him to step inside. And now, there was no turning back. Nathaniel remained on his knees for what felt like hours, though he knew time here was a concept that had long since stopped making sense. The mirrors around him shimmered with impossible angles, reflecting not just his image, but fragments of spaces he had never seen before. He could glimpse corridors that twisted into themselves, doors that opened into rooms, stacked upon rooms in defiance of geometry, and shadows that moved independently of light. Each reflection seemed to whisper secrets just beyond comprehension, fragments of words, feelings, and memories that were not entirely his own. Slowly, he forced himself to stand. His legs trembled, weak from fear and disorientation. But his curiosity had begun to outweigh his terror. He had no more. Whatever this place was, it existed beyond the rules of the world he knew, and yet it felt deliberate, as if it had a consciousness that had chosen him. He stepped forward, his reflection fracturing with every motion. The liquid floor rippled, sending waves across the mirrored surfaces that distorted his image into grotesque, elongated forms. Nathaniel clenched his fist to steady himself, reminding himself that he was real, that he still had control, though deep down he knew he had none. The figure that had greeted him earlier was gone, but its presence lingered in the air, heavy and watching. Every step Nathaniel took seemed to echo with intent, reverberating through the room in a way that suggested the space itself was alive, breathing, adjusting to his presence. He approached one of the mirrors, curious despite the growing unease in his chest. As he peered into it, the reflection shifted. It was no longer simply him staring back. The figure appeared again, indistinct, wavering like smoke, standing just behind his mirrored self. Nathaniel spun around. Empty room. Only the mirrors remained. His heart pounded, adrenaline flooding his system, and he realized that the figure existed in the mirrors or in the reflections themselves. Not in the room, not in reality as he knew it, but somewhere in between. A faint sound caught his attention. A soft, almost musical tapping, like fingernails on glass. It came from the far side of the room, though every direction was mirrored, every corner identical. Nathaniel hesitated, then moved toward it, his reflection multiplying with every step. As he approached, the sound stopped. The mirrors were silent, blank, yet he could feel eyes following him from within them. One mirror, different from the others, began to ripple like water disturbed by a pebble. Nathaniel's reflection blurred, then sharpened into a distorted version of himself. Hollow eyes, mouth open in a silent scream, hands reaching toward him as if trying to escape. The figure inside the mirror raised a finger, pointing directly at him, and he instinctively flinched back. But the finger remained, unmoving, unblinking, a command and a warning all at once. The whispers returned, softer now, but sharper, more coherent. Not words, not fully formed, but emotions, memories, and fragments of other people's experiences pressed against his mind. He heard laughter, sudden and sharp, a cry for help, a sensation of falling, of drowning. Each fragment lasted only a moment before dissolving into the thick hum of the room. Nathaniel staggered, clutching his head, trying to make sense of it. "You're not supposed to be here," a voice whispered in his mind. Not spoken aloud, not part of the echoes of the mirrors, but inside him, intimate and undeniable. "You don't understand yet. You will." He stumbled backward and fell, his palms sliding over the liquid floor. The reflections swirled violently, forming shapes and patterns that made no sense, impossible geometries that bent reality around him. Every surface seemed to pulse, alive, responding to his fear. And then, from a corner of his eye, he saw it. Another door, smaller than the first, framed in dark, polished wood that seemed impossibly perfect, as though untouched by the liquid chaos around it. It was slightly open, revealing a dim, amber light that cut through the mirrored reflections like a blade. Nathaniel's curiosity overpowered his terror. Something about the door called to him, intimate and insistent. He approached cautiously, each step echoing and fracturing in the liquid floor. As he drew closer, the room around him began to shift. Mirrors stretched and twisted, walls bending outward and inward simultaneously. Shadows lengthened unnaturally, pooling on the floor and walls as if drawn to the new door. The whispers surged again, overlapping and surging into a chaotic symphony of sound and sensation. He reached for the handle. The moment his fingers brushed it, a jolt shot through his arm, not painful, but electric, as if the door itself had recognized him. The amber light intensified, illuminating the space beyond in a glow that felt alive, warm, and terrifying at once. Nathaniel hesitated, knowing that stepping through could change everything. That stepping through could take him somewhere beyond comprehension, somewhere that might never allow him to return. And yet, he stepped through. The world shifted instantly. The mirrors, the liquid floor, the pulsing walls, all vanished. He found himself standing in a vast, empty expanse of darkness, stretching infinitely in every direction. It was not oppressive. It was quiet, strangely calm, as though the void itself were watching, waiting, holding its breath. The air was thick, almost tangible, a soft hum vibrating through his chest, resonating with the thrum of his own heartbeat. Then he saw them, faint lights, distant and flickering, scattered across the darkness. They pulsed rhythmically, like a heartbeat scattered into pieces across the void. And in the space between the lights, shadowy forms moved, indistinct, impossible to fully perceive, yet clearly aware of him. They drifted through the darkness with a purpose, gliding and twisting, never approaching but never retreating. Nathaniel's instincts screamed at him to run, to turn back, to flee to the familiarity of the door he had entered. But there was no door, no mirrors, no floor, no walls. Only the void and the flickering lights, and the sense of being observed. And then one of the forms paused, turning to face him. For the first time, Nathaniel felt the full weight of its awareness. It was neither human nor animal, neither living nor dead. It existed in the spaces between reality, a being of consciousness and intent, and it regarded him as one regards a puzzle or a test. "You should not have come," it said, voice echoing in his mind again, calm, measured. "And yet, you are here. Now you must see." The words resonated through him, a vibration in his bones that left him breathless. He understood, instinctively, that the void was not empty. It was a place of truth, of knowledge beyond human comprehension, and he had been invited, or perhaps condemned, to witness it. The lights began to move, arranging themselves into patterns, fractals that shifted and grew, impossible geometries that defied logic and reason. Nathaniel's mind strained to comprehend them. He felt his perception stretching, bending, expanding, and breaking. Memories from his own life intertwined with visions that were not his own. Faces he had never seen, places he had never been, sensations he had never experienced. And beneath it all, a whisper of understanding, like a key turning in the lock of his mind. He was not alone here. The void itself was alive, and it had noticed him. A sudden surge of vertigo overtook him. The patterns of light became overwhelming, the shadows more distinct, forming shapes that seemed to pulse with awareness. Nathaniel fell to his knees, clutching his head, trying to force coherence out of the chaos. The whispers were louder now, no longer fleeting fragments, but a chorus of intent, pressing into his consciousness. "Do you see it? Do you understand? You cannot turn back." He opened his eyes. One of the lights had separated from the rest, drifting closer. Unlike the others, it seemed to have shape, a form vaguely humanoid, yet shifting, shimmering, impossible to pin down. It stopped before him, hovering at eye level, and Nathaniel felt an understanding pass between them. Not through words, not through sound, but through thought and sensation. "You will not leave," the light communicated, neither cruel nor kind, simply stating fact. "And yet, you will learn. All who enter must learn." Nathaniel's breath caught in his throat. The void pulsed with an intensity that was almost unbearable, and he realized, with a shiver, that he had not just stepped through a door. He had crossed a threshold into a realm that existed beyond the rules of human perception, a place where consciousness itself could be stretched, tested, and unraveled. And in that moment, he understood a terrifying truth. The door had not brought him here by accident. He had been chosen or noticed by something vast, ancient, and impossibly aware. And now that he was here, there would be no turning back. Nathaniel stayed kneeling in the void for a long moment, the strange humanoid light hovering before him, pulsing softly, radiating a quiet, incomprehensible awareness. He wanted to speak, to ask what this place was, what he was supposed to do, but his voice felt trapped in his throat, as though the air itself resisted articulation. Words here were inadequate. Thought alone seemed both heavy and fragile, as if each idea could shatter under the weight of understanding. The light moved closer, and Nathaniel noticed something strange. Its shape was almost human, yet flickered, dissolving and reforming like liquid silver in motion. He realized, with a chill, that it mirrored his movements subtly, not an exact replication, but as though anticipating his thoughts. When he reached out, it recoiled, then stretched in strange response, communicating not with sound, but with deliberate, impossible motion. "You are seeing, but not yet understanding," a voice resonated in his mind. Familiar yet alien, calm yet undeniably commanding. Nathaniel felt a shiver run down his spine. The void itself seemed to vibrate with the rhythm of the words, echoing them in his bones. "All who enter must perceive beyond the senses they trust. You will learn or be lost." Nathaniel swallowed hard. He tried to step backward, but the expanse of darkness stretched endlessly behind him, unbroken, offering no retreat. The lights scattered across the void pulsed, rearranging themselves, forming patterns that suggested pathways, yet each path seemed to fold back on itself. It was as if the void were a living labyrinth, shifting to confound and disorient anyone who entered. The whispers returned, softer now, yet insistent. They were not random fragments, but coherent sensations, like memories leaking through the walls of his mind. He felt joy, fear, regret, longing, all from people he had never met, places he had never seen. Each sensation was layered, overlapping with others, until his own consciousness felt thin, stretched to the edge of comprehension. And then came movement from a distance. Shadows twisted and elongated across the void, drifting toward him. They were like the forms he had glimpsed before, but now they moved with purpose, advancing as though aware of his thoughts, aware of the pulse of his fear. The humanoid light remained before him, steady, observing, almost protective, yet he knew it could not intervene. This was his journey alone. He took a trembling step forward. Instantly, the patterns of light shifted, responding to his presence. Pathways opened and closed like breathing lungs, fractals forming and dissolving in impossible sequences. The void seemed to stretch him, testing him, gauging his resolve, probing the limits of his mind. Every instinct screamed for retreat, yet curiosity anchored him, a tether stronger than fear. Time began to lose meaning. Minutes, hours, maybe days, the void did not care. Nathaniel noticed that the distant lights began to move in sync with his own heartbeat, pulsing faster as his pulse quickened, slowing as he calmed. The shadows twisted, forming shapes that resembled familiar objects, streets from his childhood, the staircase of his old apartment, the faces of people he had known. Each image was distorted, unnerving, uncanny, reminding him that reality itself could be bent here. He reached toward one of the lights, and it shivered at his touch, spreading warmth and a sense of recognition, but not comfort. The experience was intoxicating and terrifying, like staring into a mirror of the soul where every secret, fear, and desire was magnified and laid bare. Nathaniel felt his consciousness fraying at the edges, yet a strange exhilaration filled him, the pull of knowledge beyond human comprehension. The humanoid light shifted, and suddenly the void changed. The patterns of light coalesced into structures, arches, towers, impossible bridges suspended over nothing. Shadows became tangible shapes, like corridors and staircases, yet they remained insubstantial, dissolving when approached. Nathaniel realized that the void was teaching him to see differently, to perceive reality in ways that were not limited by physical laws. And then came the voices. This time, louder, more direct. Not whispers, but intelligible, yet still layered in strangeness. "Do you understand yet?" they asked, voices of many, overlapping, echoing, each conveying meaning beyond words. Perception is not what it seems. Fear is a tool. Curiosity is a key. You are here because you sought it, because you were willing to see. Nathaniel struggled to absorb it, each thought and sensation pressing against his mind. He realized that his own fears and memories were being reflected back at him, amplified, tested. Every shadow, every flicker of light, every whisper was a probe into the depth of his psyche. The void was alive, not in a way that resembled life as he knew it, but in a way that sensed, responded, and adapted to his consciousness. He stepped forward again toward a distant tower formed of light. The humanoid figure glided beside him, guiding subtly, suggesting rather than leading. Shadows moved to block him, forming walls and gates of blackness that had no edges yet pressed against his mind with undeniable intent. He felt panic rising, but he forced himself to breathe, to move slowly, deliberately, feeling the rhythm of the void with each step. And then he heard it, his own name, whispered, but not by the void, not by the humanoid light, not by the overlapping consciousness of the shadows. It came from inside him, a voice he recognized, yet could not place. It carried urgency, warning, familiarity, and dread simultaneously. Nathaniel, do not trust them. They are not what they seem. He spun, searching for a source, but there was none. Only the void, the lights, the shadows, and the humanoid figure gliding alongside him, constant yet distant. His heartbeat accelerated, the void responding, pulsing with his fear. He realized, with mounting terror, that even his own thoughts were no longer entirely his own. The void was reading him, interpreting him, perhaps even shaping him. A sudden ripple passed through the space, and the tower of light fractured, sending shards scattering in all directions. Shadows surged forward, more aggressive now, moving with the intent to obscure, to challenge, to test. Nathaniel staggered, clutching his head, struggling to maintain his sense of self. The whispers surged again, a cacophony of emotions, memories, and sensations that threatened to overwhelm him. And then the humanoid light stopped. It hovered directly before him, radiating a warmth that cut through the chaos. Focus, it communicated, not with words but with sensation, pressing gently into his mind, guiding him. You must see clearly. Fear clouds perception. Curiosity illuminates the path. Nathaniel inhaled deeply, centering himself as best he could. He focused on the warmth of the light, the rhythm of his own pulse, and the faint patterns of movement in the void. Slowly, the shadows receded, the fractured tower reformed, and the whispers softened to coherent echoes. He realized that the void was teaching him control, not through dominance, but through awareness. Step by step, he moved toward the tower. Each motion sharpened his perception. Each breath synchronized him with the rhythm of the lights and shadows. He began to understand the void, not fully, but enough to navigate its shifting landscapes, to anticipate its distortions, and to withstand its probing into his mind. And yet, even as he progressed, a deep, insidious dread lingered. He understood that learning here came at a cost. Each revelation, each perception, stretched his mind closer to the edge of comprehension. The void did not merely test the body. It tested the self, the consciousness, the soul. And some part of him knew that one wrong step, one lapse in focus could leave him lost, fractured, or consumed. The humanoid light paused at the base of the tower. Nathaniel looked up, and for the first time, he felt the scale of this place, the vastness, the incomprehensible geometry, the awareness that stretched beyond sight or sound. The void was immense, ancient, patient, and infinitely observant. And he, small and fragile, had been drawn into its depths. You have come far, the light communicated, yet the path is only beginning. What lies above is not what you expect. Prepare yourself, Nathaniel. There is more to see, and the void watches all. Nathaniel nodded, though the words had not left his mouth. The shadows stirred again, the lights pulsed, and the void itself seemed to hold its breath. He stepped forward toward the tower, toward the unknown, feeling both dread and exhilaration. He was deeper into the void than ever before, and there was no turning back. Nathaniel climbed the steps of the tower, each one impossibly narrow, stretching into the darkness above. The void around him shifted subtly with every movement, the distant lights and shadows responding as if aware of his presence, their rhythm aligning with his heartbeat. The humanoid light hovered beside him, its warmth a strange reassurance amid the endless uncertainty. With every step, Nathaniel felt his own sense of time dissolving. Minutes and hours blended together, the void stretching and compressing in ways that made his head spin. He could no longer tell whether he had been here for moments or eternities. The tower seemed infinite, a structure that expanded upward without end. Yet each step brought him closer to a light he could not see, to a truth he could not yet comprehend. Then the first phenomenon occurred. The stairs beneath his feet rippled, as though the solid stone had become liquid. Nathaniel froze, gripping the edges to steady himself. The ripple flowed upward, distorting the steps, reshaping them, creating impossible angles that should have caused him to fall. Yet his body moved with uncanny precision, guided by instinct and a strange attunement to the void. He realized, with a jolt, that the space itself was testing him, not trying to harm, but probing his mind, measuring his reactions, forcing him to adapt. The humanoid light floated closer, its pulse synchronizing with the rhythm of the rippling steps. Nathaniel followed, each motion deliberate, careful. The whispers returned, layered and complex, voices of countless beings echoing through the void. Not words, not fully coherent, but emotions, sensations, and fleeting visions pressed into his mind. He saw flashes of other worlds, of places he had never visited, of people he had never known. And beneath it all, a sense of recognition, as though the void itself remembered him before he remembered himself. A sudden shift made him stumble. The stairs dissolved entirely, replaced by a narrow bridge of light stretching into the darkness. He could see nothing below, nothing above. The void pressed in, and for the first time, Nathaniel felt true vertigo, the sensation of falling into an infinite abyss. His heart raced, but he forced himself to step forward, trusting the rhythm of the light, the guidance of the humanoid figure, and the strange clarity that had begun to form in his mind. As he crossed the bridge, the void changed again. Shadows solidified into forms, tall, featureless beings that drifted in silence, observing him. Their presence was not hostile, yet it carried weight, a pressure on his thoughts that made his head ache. Nathaniel sensed their awareness probing the edges of his consciousness, testing his resolve. The humanoid light pulsed, a signal of reassurance, and he pressed onward, each step deliberate, controlled, attuned to the shifting patterns of perception. At the end of the bridge, he entered a chamber unlike any space he had seen in the void. It was vast and spherical, walls and floor indistinguishable, illuminated by diffuse light that seemed to come from everywhere and nowhere. In the center, a pool of liquid light shimmered, its surface reflecting not his own image but fragments of reality itself. Nathaniel approached cautiously. The pool rippled as he neared, revealing visions, moments from his own past, but distorted, warped, and interwoven with glimpses of impossible futures. He saw himself standing at the alley with the first door, yet also glimpsed versions of himself that had never existed. He saw choices he had never made, paths he had never taken, lives he could never live. The pool was a mirror, yes, but of something far beyond simple reflection. It was a lens into the infinite possibilities of existence. A voice echoed in his mind, calm yet insistent. Do you see it, Nathaniel? Do you understand what lies beyond perception? He nodded, though the voice did not require it. I think so, he whispered internally, struggling to find coherence amid the overwhelming visions. I see so much. The humanoid light hovered over the pool, its warmth radiating into him, stabilizing the chaos swirling in his mind. Nathaniel reached toward the surface, his fingers barely grazing it. The moment he touched the liquid light, a wave of sensation surged through him. He felt knowledge, memory, emotion, and experience not his own flooding into him. He saw entire worlds, civilizations rising and falling, stars being born and dying, and lives played out in endless repetition. And yet, he retained himself, just barely, anchored by the presence of the light. Then came the warning, not in words, but in understanding. Do not linger. The void tests patience. Curiosity is a key, but obsession is a trap. Choose, Nathaniel. Proceed, or be consumed. Fear flared within him, but curiosity and determination outweighed it. He pulled his hand back and stepped away from the pool, feeling the hum of the void settle around him once more. The humanoid light pulsed, approvingly or neutrally. He could not tell. The path forward became clear. The stairs continued, spiraling upward toward a light that grew brighter with each step. The void shifted again. Walls and floor dissolved, replaced by a series of floating platforms, each suspended over an impossible drop. Nathaniel's heart pounded, but he stepped carefully, one foot in front of the other, attuned to the rhythm of the light and the subtle guidance of the humanoid figure. The shadows whispered, again pressing on his mind, offering both challenge and knowledge. A sudden movement startled him. A shadow detached itself from the others, approaching with purpose. It was vaguely humanoid, yet its form was inconsistent, constantly shifting. Nathaniel froze. The void seemed to hold its breath. You must not falter, the humanoid light communicated. It is testing you. The void always tests. The shifting shadow paused, observing him, then moved aside, allowing him to continue. Nathaniel exhaled, his pulse racing. He realized that every encounter, every step, was part of the void's curriculum. Lessons in awareness, perception, and the limits of consciousness itself. As he progressed, he began to sense patterns in the void. The lights, shadows, and whispers were not random. They formed a rhythm, a logic that he could barely perceive. He began to move with them, anticipating changes, adjusting to distortions, understanding, slowly, that the void was not merely a place. It was an entity, and he was becoming attuned to its flow. And yet, beneath this growing awareness, a seed of dread remained. He understood that the void demanded attention, vigilance, and comprehension. Any lapse could lead to disorientation, madness, or being lost entirely. And somewhere deep within him, he knew that the greatest challenges had yet to come. The staircase ended at a doorway, framed in pale light that seemed to shimmer and breathe. Beyond it, he glimpsed movement, figures, structures, and forms that defied understanding, a glimpse of a realm even deeper, more intricate, more incomprehensible than the one he had navigated thus far. The void waited beyond, patient, knowing, and impossibly aware of his presence. Nathaniel hesitated at the threshold, feeling the weight of all he had learned, all he had seen, and all he had yet to comprehend. The whispers softened, the shadows paused, the lights pulsed gently. The humanoid figure hovered beside him, radiating reassurance, yet its form flickered subtly, a reminder that it too was a construct of the void. He stepped forward. The door closed behind him silently, and the void shifted once more. Nathaniel stepped into the next chamber, and the void shifted violently around him. The floor dissolved beneath his feet, replaced by a lattice of glowing strands that pulsed and twisted like living nerves. Shadows surged from all directions, stretching and fracturing, forming shapes that reminded him of faces, but not human faces. They were familiar and alien at the same time, features distorted into unrecognizable configurations, staring at him with an intensity that pierced his mind. His heartbeat accelerated. He realized he could no longer trust his own perception. The void responded to his fear, amplifying it, bending it into forms meant to challenge him. He clutched his head, trying to steady his thoughts. The humanoid light hovered nearby, its warmth anchoring him just enough to prevent panic from consuming him entirely. Focus. The light conveyed, a sensation pressing gently into his consciousness. You must see beyond the fear. Observe, do not react. The void is a teacher, not a tormentor. Your mind is the key. Nathaniel forced himself to inhale slowly, letting the rhythm of his breath align with the subtle pulse of the lattice beneath him. The strands responded, glowing brighter with each deliberate exhale, dimming when his mind wavered. He realized the void was not random. It tested his awareness, his ability to maintain composure, his perception under pressure. Suddenly, a figure emerged from the lattice. It was humanoid, but its limbs elongated and shifted with unnatural fluidity. Its eyes, or what he assumed were eyes, glowed faintly, observing him with a calculated intensity. Nathaniel stepped back, but the floor beneath him rippled, forcing him to advance instead. The figure advanced too, and he felt a pressure in his chest, a quiet insistence that he confront it rather than flee. You are here to see. The humanoid light communicated again, to understand. Do not fear what is not yet known. You must pass this threshold. The shifting figure opened its mouth, but no sound came. Instead, a wave of images flooded Nathaniel's mind. Memories, both his own and not his own, intertwined. He saw choices he had never made, consequences he had never faced, and fears that had lurked hidden beneath his consciousness. The void fed on thought, translating it into forms that challenged his understanding of self. He stumbled, nearly falling into the glowing lattice, but caught himself. Each pulse of the strands beneath him resonated with his awareness. He realized the void responded not to action alone, but to intent, to consciousness. The humanoid figure was testing him, measuring his ability to perceive without panic, to adapt without losing identity. The whispers returned, louder and more distinct, overlapping into a chorus that felt like both warning and instruction. See beyond. Understand. Observe. Do not falter. They were not voices. They were awareness itself, pressing on his mind from all directions. Nathaniel felt the edges of his perception stretching, bending, fracturing. He saw patterns in the void, fractals of light and shadow that formed intricate webs, pathways, and possibilities that his mind struggled to comprehend. And then the humanoid figure split, not in two, but in dozens, hundreds of forms, each flickering, shifting, impossible to track individually. They advanced, surrounding him, pressing on every angle of his consciousness. Nathaniel felt panic rising, but he forced himself to breathe, focusing on the warmth and pulse of the humanoid light that had guided him this far. Step by step, he moved through the lattice, each motion deliberate, each breath synchronized with the rhythm of the void. The multitude of shifting forms followed, testing him, probing his reactions, forcing his mind to expand beyond normal limits. Images flashed, moments of past fear, glimpses of possible futures, fragments of lives he could never live. And beneath it all, a singular understanding. The void demanded awareness, not submission. Suddenly, the chamber tilted. Gravity itself seemed to shift, disorienting him, bending the lattice beneath his feet into impossible angles. He clung to the strands, feeling their energy pulse through his hands, anchoring him as the void tested his balance, perception, and willpower. Every instinct told him to retreat, to flee into the dark emptiness beyond, but he pressed on. The humanoid light pulsed in encouragement, radiating clarity that cut through the overwhelming sensory input. At the center of the chamber, a platform emerged, a floating island of glowing light, stable amidst the chaos. Nathaniel moved toward it, the lattice twisting beneath him, the multitude of humanoid forms swirling around. As he stepped onto the platform, the shifting figures halted, forming a circle around him, their glowing eyes fixed, their shapes fluid yet purposeful. The whispers softened, merging into a single sensation, a vibration through his bones that conveyed both challenge and revelation. Nathaniel felt comprehension brush against him, an understanding that the void was not a prison, but a living, conscious realm. It did not simply exist. It observed, it interacted, it shaped those who entered, and those who survived were transformed. You have come far, the humanoid light conveyed, pressing its presence into him. Yet this is the ultimate test. The void will show you what lies beyond perception. You may choose to look, but once you do, there is no returning unchanged. Nathaniel's breath caught. He looked around the platform, at the myriad shifting forms, at the lattice stretching into nothingness, at the distant lights flickering like stars across the void. He understood, viscerally, that the next step would not just challenge his mind, but his very sense of self. The shadows and whispers coalesced into a single pathway, leading upward into a space of absolute light, a radiance that was both blinding and comforting, impossible yet inevitable. Nathaniel hesitated. His instincts screamed caution, yet a deep, unshakable curiosity pulled him forward. The void had drawn him here for a reason, and now he had the choice to confront what lay at the pinnacle of its design. With a final deep breath, he stepped onto the pathway. The humanoid light hovered beside him, pulsing rhythmically, anchoring him as the void responded to his intent. The lattice of shadows and lights swirled around him, fracturing and reforming, a symphony of perception that stretched his mind to its limits. As he ascended, the whispers became coherent, forming a language of sensation and meaning. Do not fear. Observe. Understand. Accept. Each step pressed against his consciousness, challenging him to remain aware, to see without judgment, to comprehend without fear. And at the apex, the space opened into a chamber of unimaginable scale. Light, shadow, and form existed simultaneously, layers of reality stacked upon each other, folding and twisting, revealing glimpses of infinite possibilities. The void itself seemed to breathe, pulsing in rhythm with Nathaniel's own heartbeat. The humanoid figure shifted, its presence radiant and absolute. Nathaniel understood, without words, that he was witnessing the culmination of the void's trial. Perception unbound, consciousness tested to the brink, a truth beyond fear, beyond comprehension. He inhaled deeply, stepping fully into the chamber, and the void responded. The lights, shadows, and whispers converged, folding around him, through him, and within him. His mind expanded, stretched, and for a brief moment, he glimpsed the infinite, the totality of the void, the rhythm of existence, the essence of awareness itself. And then, just as suddenly as it began, the pulse receded. The void stilled. The shadows froze. The lights softened, forming a single path that led forward, calm, steady, infinite. Nathaniel stood at the center, breathless, forever altered by what he had seen, his mind stretched beyond the boundaries of ordinary perception. He understood now. The void had tested him, shaped him, and prepared him for the final step. What lay ahead was no longer just a path, but a choice, a decision that would define not just his experience, but his very existence within this place. Nathaniel took the first step along the single path that had emerged from the void's convergence. The floor beneath him was solid, yet impossible, a bridge of light suspended in infinite darkness. The shadows and whispers he had grown accustomed to were gone, leaving a silence so profound that his own heartbeat sounded like a drum in an empty hall. The humanoid light hovered beside him, pulsating gently, a constant presence in the incomprehensible expanse. Nathaniel felt both reassurance and a subtle reminder that he was not free, that the void still watched, and that the path itself was a test of understanding, not merely endurance. The bridge stretched endlessly before him, yet each step brought new sensations. The void seemed to breathe beneath him, its rhythm attuned to his awareness. The infinite layers of light and shadow swirled subtly at the periphery of his vision, teasing perception, coaxing insight, and whispering possibilities beyond comprehension. He realized that the void had changed him. He was no longer the man who had entered the first door in that rainy alley of Windermere. His mind had been stretched, sharpened, and tested. Memories of fear, hesitation, and uncertainty now seemed distant, almost alien. Yet the weight of the experience pressed upon him, a quiet reminder that knowledge had its cost. Ahead, the path opened into a vast chamber, a space of unimaginable clarity. The walls dissolved into layers of radiance and shadow, the floor reflecting fragments of worlds Nathaniel had glimpsed in the pool of light. It was at once beautiful and disorienting, a space where perception itself became fluid. In the center of the chamber stood a figure, not the humanoid light that had guided him, but something older, vast, and impossibly aware. Its form shifted constantly, like smoke sculpted by wind, yet it radiated intelligence and intent. Nathaniel felt a quiet understanding. This was the consciousness of the void, the entity that had observed, tested, and shaped him throughout his journey. "You have come far," the being conveyed, not in words, but as a direct impression upon his mind. "You have seen what few ever glimpse, endured what most would flee. Now you face the final choice, understanding or return." Nathaniel's chest tightened. He had come seeking answers, drawn by curiosity and an unshakable need to know. Yet now that the culmination of the void's trial was before him, he hesitated. Understanding promised infinite insight, a connection to the consciousness that had guided him. Return meant leaving with the memory of what he had seen, but never the depth of perception the void offered. I don't know if I can," he thought, though the impression was not one of weakness, merely honesty. The being responded, gently, yet with clarity. "Comprehension carries responsibility. Fear clouds it, hesitation delays it. Decide." The choice pulsed before him, a tangible sensation, like standing at the edge of a precipice that opened into eternity. Nathaniel felt the pull of the infinite, the potential to see, to understand, to merge awareness with something beyond human perception. At the same time, he felt the pull of familiarity, the desire to return to the world he knew, to the life he had once lived, to the tangible reality outside the void. He took a step forward, then another, feeling the bridge of light respond to his intent. His mind reached outward, brushing against the consciousness of the void, tentative at first, then with growing confidence. Images, sensations, and understanding flowed into him, yet he retained himself. He saw the interconnection of all things, the rhythm of existence, the delicate interplay of perception and reality. And then, with a clarity that was both terrifying and liberating, he stepped back. Not out of fear, but out of choice. He would return, carrying the awareness the void had given him, but preserving the self that had begun the journey. The chamber shifted. The figure of the void pulsed once, a vibration that resonated through Nathaniel's entire being, acknowledging his decision. The pathway behind him shimmered, transforming into the first door he had entered in Windermere. It was the same, yet imbued with the memory of everything he had experienced. Nathaniel approached the door. As his hand touched the familiar oak, the void released him, not as punishment, but as recognition of choice. He felt the weight of infinite perception receding, leaving him with insight, caution, and the quiet hum of awareness that would forever linger at the edge of his mind. The door opened, and the rain-slick alley greeted him once more. The air smelled of damp wood and smoke, of reality itself, ordinary yet precious. Nathaniel stepped through, the door closing behind him with the soft click that had begun his journey. He looked around. The alley was empty. The storm continued. The streetlights flickered, and the familiar sounds of Windermere filled his senses. Yet something was different. Every shadow, every reflection, every distant light carried a subtle resonance, a reminder of the void he had traversed, the consciousness he had encountered, and the understanding he had earned. Nathaniel walked away from the door, his steps steady, his mind alert. He knew the void had left a permanent mark on him. Its lessons, its perception, its trials, they would remain, shaping his awareness, sharpening his insight, and reminding him that some doors, once opened, leave traces that never fade. And though the door was gone now, leaving only an ordinary alley behind, Nathaniel understood. Some places, some truths, exist beyond perception. They're waiting for those willing to see. And for those who choose to return, the world is never quite the same. The wind rustled through the alley, carrying a whisper that was almost imperceptible, yet unmistakable. You have seen. You remember. And the void watches still. Nathaniel shivered, a mix of awe, fear, and understanding coursing through him. He did not look back. He could not. The journey had changed him, and he would carry it forever. As he walked into the dim glow of the streetlights, the storm beginning to ease, the ordinary world seemed richer, deeper, more fragile, and infinitely more mysterious than he had ever imagined.